We're fighting a battle. We're singing the same song, trying to find someone who cares as much as we do. We're climbing the ladder while we're sinking in this boat, trying to find someone who cares.
Hello and welcome back to Babble Scribbler, the podcast show about MLP and its fandom and its fanfics and everything in between. Today I am talking about a fanfiction called The Library of Discord by Chinchillax, and I am joined by a very special someone, Reverb Brony. I'm going to leave him to explain who he is and why he's here.
Hello everyone, my name's Reverb Brony. I'm a Brony musician. I've been making music for a couple of years now. Lots of different kinds of music, heavy metal, rock, orchestral, acoustic, a few ambient electronic things, and usually just throw them all together and make it go for 3.5 hours at a time. I also do background music for the lovely Scribblers, different radio plays and stuff like that, and I've been a part of the Heroic Review, reviewing fanfictions and episodes, also for a couple of years, so yay.
Yep, so Heroic Review started in 2013 and you started doing background music in 2012, I think it was? Maybe 2012. It's been a long time. It's been a very long time. We're old and decrepit fandom people now. All these new little whippersnappers coming into the fandom, and yeah, we remember it when it was young. Speaking of things that are old, talking today about Discord in, like I said before, the fanfiction The Library of Discord. This is an interesting fic in a number of different ways, primarily of which Reverb and I have been trying to review this thing for over a year.
I know. And we've gotten so close a few different times. It's like, right, we're going to do it this weekend. All right, I'll reread the fic, redo a bunch of different notes, and then we'll delay it again. So
yeah, we originally planned to do this as we were going to open up a document in Google Docs and like each write our bit and have a script and do it as a video, that kind of thing.
That's right. This was supposed to be, wasn't this supposed to be the first Babble Scribbler?
It was, yes. Then it turned out not to be. And yeah, how many times have we read and listened to this thing now? Something like 6?
6 times, and it's kind of funny, my opinion of it has changed each time from like different extremes.
I must admit that it's crystallised some of my ideas about it, but which just makes it doubly ironic that today, like 2 hours ago, I got onto Skype and said, right, 2 hours, do you want to review this story? You went, yes, right, okay. So this is with all the preparation of all the previous times in front of us and 2 hours to read it. So
I reread my notes. That's about it.
I have my post-its as well. So yay for post-its. And we should probably get on to the actual story, because this story...
You've had those post-its, those same post-its for a year.
I don't throw things away. You know me. They're stuck in a notebook. Okay. So, right, yes. Library of Discord. I listened to this on YouTube when it was first released in 2013, and it's read by the author Chinchillax. And I came across it randomly when I found a thread on a fanfiction group, I can't even remember what group it was now, asking for fanfiction readings, and Chinchillax posted the link, and he'd very recently done that. And I passed the story across to Reverb, and he read it, and we both had our own opinions on it, but we didn't decide to do a review of it until, like I said, a year ago. I'm going to leave Reverb to read the synopsis, because the synopsis captures some of what it's about, but not everything. So, carry on, Reverb?
Alrighty, here we go. Discord has trapped Twilight in a vast, seemingly unending library. This library has a copy of every spell-checked book that ever probably existed. Twilight's only way out of the library would be to find a book that explains how to escape. But when every single idea, story, possibility, and random book exists, how can she find the one book that can teach her how to leave this unfathomably... all your subscribers know how badly I messed up that one person's name when I was trying to... Corpulent Brony, I'm sorry I messed up your name. Unfathomably large library. This fanfic is a crossover based on the ideas presented in the short story The Library of Babble by...
Oh, here we go, you got another name
George
strike.
Louis Borges.
Georges Louis Borges.
And... I wasn't even close. And influenced by A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck.
You couldn't get that name wrong. Okay.
Watch me try.
So, yes, mispronunciations aside, that only captures a little bit of what this story is about, because we're getting into... This podcast will be spoilerific, because there are certain things that happen in here that we have opinions on. So, that's generally what it's about. But in actual fact, this story centers around what happens when Discord basically gives in to chaos again. It was written, as we said, in November 2013, and it was written before Discord had been reformed, I think, in fandom, in canon, or at least it had been written before then and then released at that point. And because of that, when he fell into chaos, we didn't really have too much. In fact, no, he had been. I'm completely wrong about this because I just thought about a later plot point. Yeah, it was written around the time that Fluttershy had reformed, in inverted commas, Discord from his chaotic nature. And this story details what happens when he has given in to chaos again. The elements of harmony have turned him to stone, and they realise, when they've turned him to stone, that Spike is missing. And that Spike has been sucked into Discord's head, along with all the chaos, which disappeared when he was turned to stone. And they have to get Spike back, and that's why Twilight goes into Discord's head, which turns out to be a mini-dimension filled with a library, because Discord inside his head is actually not as chaotic as he appears from the outside. That the Discord in his head exists in a world where he has slowed time. No, he speeded up time. Or he slowed time. He's done something with tiny, whiny, woolly, wobbly stuff.
He's slowed down his mind and... Actually, no. Yeah, sorry. Continue on, I'm just as confused.
He slowed down time in his mind, I think. So time outside is going remarkably faster than in his head.
That's right. I remember what he did now. He sped up his thought process so he can think and react to everything and basically do everything hundreds of times faster than everyone else.
I think it was sort of hundreds of thousands of times faster by the end, wasn't it? Because he talks about how Twilight had been there for 2 minutes, but in actuality, hours and hours and hours had passed outside. So
hang on, no, other way around.
No,
because remember at the end when...
Should we start this bit of the conversation again? Because you clearly don't understand the thing.
When Twilight goes out and is straight away like...
Yes, you're right.
Fluttershy goes out and is like, you gotta quickly release Discord, you gotta release him, and they're like, what? And even in that process of like the...
Yes, you're right.
It's, trying to
yeah, you're right. It is. It's years and years pass inside his head and seconds have passed outside. That's it. Because when Twilight finds Spike, Spike is an adult.
Actually, no, I think it said 2 years have passed since then. That was actually one of the notes I had. The 2 years that had passed, except apparently now Spike is taller than her, which in 2 years I don't really buy. Because, I mean, even kind of since then in the show, I think of each season as a year, kind of.
Not really, because it said that the Grand Galloping Gala from season 5, it shows that it's only been just over a year that Twilight's been in Ponyville. That was a really busy year.
That is a really busy year.
Yeah, I mean, Equestria has nearly been destroyed how many times in this 1 year?
Oh, well, I mean, regardless, I mean, of how tall Spike is, and I mean, he was born when Twilight got a cutie mark, and he's that tall, I'd imagine, like, maybe 10 years old, maybe, roughly.
I don't know, we're getting into that debate about how old the main six are with that.
Sure, but I mean, in 2 years, I can't imagine he'd be taller than Twilight.
Well, that's what Chinchillax himself has done. He's made an internal canon. He's made an internal logic to his fanon, and he has followed it. So regardless of what we think it could be possible, he does stick to 2 years, Spike is taller. And despite the fact that we completely and utterly screwed up any understanding of time dynamics, Doctor Who would be ashamed of me. I'm letting down my people here. Despite having completely misunderstood that, and we've kind of got it right now, time inside Discord, it's years and years and years that Spike is stuck there. And it's days and weeks that Twilight is there. And she doesn't need food. She doesn't need water. All that she can find inside Discord's head are these books. And he has cast spells to bring a copy of every single book that has ever existed that doesn't have spelling mistakes in it. And she has to discover a way of getting out. Because there is no way out unless he releases her, and he refuses to release her unless she lets him out of stone.
You made one tiny little mistake there. You said that in this library is every book that ever existed, then without any spelling mistakes and stuff, but it's actually a combination of every word that could possibly be in a book. So I mean, like, there's a book which is filled with nothing but the word.
I just said spelling mistakes. I didn't say they had to make sense, because that's one of the things Twilight finds, isn't it?
Actually, yeah. Okay.
She opens a random book and it says it's a random collection of words like Professor 3, deviant, minimize, rate, kumquat, pineapple, melt. And it would be that kind of thing in the books. They'll all be spelled perfectly correctly, but there would be no syntax to it. There's no sense to what's written in there.
And they're all the same amount of pages and the same size book.
Yep, so they fit on these shelves, which is what I mean when I said that this is not as chaotic a place as you would think. There is still an element of chaos to it because of the random collection of words, but everything also has this absolute clear-cut logic to it. And Twilight, she's searching for Spike and she starts to realise that there is more to Discord than they ever realised, because she has to teleport to find Spike, that she starts to write her own life story and casts a finding spell on this imaginary book of her life story, and she writes in her head all of the words of her own life story except for the last few pages, which would lead her up to the current point, because she knows all the books have to be the same length. And she stops and she thinks, right, I'll cast this finding spell, and there's only one possible book it could be. And then it keeps disappearing because she's cast the spell on the shelves to find where this book is stored, and somebody keeps taking it off the shelf and putting it back down, and taking it off the shelf and putting it back down. So she teleports to find that. Except
I thought this was a really, really clever way to actually get her to find Spike, because with the amount of books that there actually are, I mean, that was something we kind of skimmed over, of how many books are actually made up, like how many books there are which consist of all these different words because of all the different possibilities. The library, he gives a dimension of the different amount of shelves, but each, like, the hallway or the depth of the shelves is
she teleports light years, doesn't she?
If the unit of measurement is a universe, then, like, just say, so 10 is 10 universes long. The number is, I think, 400,000 digits long, so 400,000 zeros, and it's that many universes long. Because
Twilight, when she tries to find Spike, is teleporting by light years, and she has never teleported that far before, but she can in this library, and she still has to teleport hundreds of thousands of times to get to Spike.
It's an insanely further amount than light years would be, because she's teleporting thousands of universes at a time.
So that's the maximum amount that she can teleport in one go, though.
It makes light years look like such a crawling pace, which is absolutely insane to try to fathom.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm not a mathematician. I am in no way, shape or form a mathematician. I genuinely, and this is, I'm going to lose a lot of people's respect in this, I still have trouble with times tables. Mental arithmetic, I just can't do. I am the person for whom calculators were introduced. Words are my thing. I love words. I hate numbers. I bloody hate... You love numbers. I hate them.
I love this. That's why one of the things I love about this fic so much is the in-depth math is absolutely insane. And I mean, because to say that it's a number which is 400,000 digits long, I mean, that's not 400,000 universes. That's, if you type 1 and then you go 0, 0, 0, 400,000 times. It's that many universes long. Which, I mean...
We have trouble even just understanding how big one universe is.
Exactly. So, it's...
You can definitely tell that Chinchillax has a background in either science or astrophysics or maths. I think it might be maths, but I don't know. But he has some numerical-based background, and it shows, because he knows his stuff. He is the kind of person whom... I've never met him. He sounds remarkably lovely, but he's the kind of person I would be scared to talk to because he sounds so clever. I would sort of sit there and just nod and smile a bit and wait for him to finish being clever.
The most clever thing I think he did with this, though, is bringing it from that huge concept to then Twilight realizing, and the way she's so completely overwhelmed by those numbers and the distance. Especially, I love the part when she is sort of dividing the distance between her and Spike by 2 over and over. And I remember this line specifically because it's a very powerful thing, and that's where she says, because with this greater number, sorry, getting distracted by huge numbers, but she is reminded of the problem of, if you keep dividing by 2 over and over and over, you'll still never reach 0.
Yeah.
And with a number this big, that's essentially what you're trying to do. I mean, it's such a long number that it might as well be an infinite number, effectively, when you're trying to divide by 0 to get there and back. Each time she's dividing by 2, she's teleporting like 200 quintillion universes at a time. And it's like just a tiny speck of distance in this library, which is absolutely insane. And then she's dividing that by 2 over and over and over again. Actually, that's something I'm curious about. She would have had is how long it takes her to say, alright, I'm teleporting, now I've got there, I'm teleporting again. Because I reckon that would take her longer than 2 years on its own.
Quite possibly. It's like, I cannot even comprehend some of the size and scale of the figures involved. There comes a point, I remember reading in a book once, that there comes a point where the human brain, unless it is sort of leaning towards that predilection, that talent, the human brain ceases to really comprehend numbers, where they become just figures on a page. That as far as an actual tangible, comprehensible thing, they stop being understandable. Like, you can imagine 1. If you can imagine, like, okay, you saw this, you remember this, you will remember this. It was from Cabin Pressure, when they imagine the otters on the plane. And yeah, just you'll remember this, and everybody else, you have no idea what I'm talking about until I finished. Imagine an otter. And if you can imagine an otter, little sleek little brown animal that lives in the water. Okay, now imagine 2 otters. And you can do that because the brain can comprehend 2. Now imagine 4 otters. Okay, we can do that. Now imagine 8 otters. And now imagine 16 otters. And now imagine... And you sort of go on to like 100, 200, 300. And your brain stops actually imagining the exact number of otters. You start just thinking of lots. And your brain will show you a picture of lots. And you will just attach to it going, 100. Okay, there must be more for 200, so you imagine more otters. You go, 200. You don't actually know because you can't visualize 200 things. So that when you start getting into figures like in this story of quintillion and all these different things, like I didn't even know quintillion was a word until just now. But you stop being able to visualize it except as drawn figures on a piece of paper. I can imagine, like you say, 1,000,000. I can imagine a 1 and 6 zeros after it. I could not visualize 1,000,000 otters. But
Could you even visualize a number with 400,000 digits in it?
No, it's just gone as far as lots. I get to a certain point and I just start seeing, right, lots of zeros, and they don't quite... I can't visualize how many zeros there are, because it's reached that point of it's too big for my brain to comprehend. And I'm hoping I'm not the only one like this. I'm hoping I'm not the anomaly to the human race.
No, that's fine. I completely understand, and I'm the same. And the only sort of... I remember the first time I read the story, I was blown away. I thought, this is amazing. I love this story so much. It was at that time when I was going to go on a massive driving trip with my mum, and I was showing her a bunch of pony things. I actually had this as something I was going to show her, but we just spent the entire time listening to Upheaval.
Yeah, I remember that. I think your mum would have just sort of stared at it and going, hang on, is this the family you're in with the small pastel ponies? And all this maths. All this maths.
Yeah, and then I think the second time I read it, or listened to Chinchillax's awesome audio version, I think then I started picking through plot holes. And I mean, the story is amazing, except I suppose the only thing is when you're working in numbers that big, there are a couple of sort of plot holes that sort of come about, like the idea of Twilight teleporting back and forth between this 400,000 digit long number of universes. and that she's only there for... Well, I mean, Spike's there for 2 years. She's there for a much, much shorter time than that, and I reckon... I mean, I haven't done the math, which I now feel quite ashamed of. But, I reckon it would have taken her a much longer time to get to him, even dividing by 2 all the time. So, I mean, I suppose you could call that a plot hole, except, I mean...
I think it would only be a plot hole to people who understand the maths. The rest of us are just there sort of staring at the screen and going, ah!
I know, and I suppose that's the idea. And I can completely forgive that, because it's such an amazing story. And you know how before you were talking about the scale of otters and I'm trying to imagine size? There's actually this really, really awesome website that Xenomorph showed me. And you scroll back and forth with the mouse, and as it zooms in, it goes to, like, the next smallest thing. Like, it starts off with Planck length, which is, like, the smallest known size which can ever exist. I think if it was like a pinprick, that was... Yeah, if you took, like, the head of a pin and expanded that head of the pin to the size of the universe, then the Planck length is even a little bit smaller than the head of the pin would be in that head of a pin the size of the universe. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's just the scale of it is hard to comprehend.
And as you scroll back a long, long way, you then start to get to, like, the size of an electron, an atom, and then it starts getting, more realistic things like, the size of an ant, and then, a dog, a person, and then, an elephant, a whale, and then, a building, and it starts to get bigger, and it's like, a city, a country, a Earth, and then it starts getting bigger and bigger to, like, the size of the sun, the size of this other star, and then bigger stars and bigger stars and bigger stars, to the point where it's like the largest sun that's ever, the largest star that we've, been able to identify as size and all this sort of stuff. And it's a pretty amazing sort of thing to sort of try to figure out. Well, you were mentioning the size of otters, trying to sort of fathom the size. This website's quite amazing at that. And what's actually quite funny is humans are sort of smack bang in the middle of, massive and really, really tiny.
I love how the unit of measurement of this podcast has become an otter. A Planck length, a light year, a universe. No, we're going to measure things in otters. But we should probably... We've talked at great length about the impressiveness of this fic and its minutiae and its grasp of maths, and it is an impressive story. We both of us listened to the audio version of this, which is read by the author. If you are reading it, I imagine it's either easier or harder to understand depending on whether or not you've got a numerically based brain, but listening to the audio version is very impressive. Re-listening to it, as Reverb said, starts to throw up a couple of different things. And we each of us have things that we thought were brilliant about the story. We're both really impressed by the maths. Both really impressed by the concept. The concept that Discord is in actual fact, and here's, spoiler, Discord is older than the multiverse. And he has seen universes born, grow old, and die, and all the creatures in them. And he has stopped seeing the point of making friends, of getting to know anybody. He has stopped seeing the point of anything. I'm waving my hands here, I'm knocking my microphone. But it's that kind of thing that he stops, it makes you wave your hands. He stops seeing the point of things, because as far as he's concerned, he's seen it all. There is nothing new ever, and will never be anything new that could ever impress him, which is why he just doesn't give a shit in canon. He just does whatever the hell he wants, because he can, and everybody's going to die anyway, and he'll still keep going, so why bother?
Actually, something really quite interesting. I love the line that he was born from the chaotic energy of a dying universe.
Yeah.
I think, that's such a cool idea that he does that. And then that he collects dying universes.
Yeah.
Which is, wow. That kind of puts his character in perspective a bit.
It does, but it's getting into that immeasurable factor that
exactly,
that's so round about the time again. The maths impressed me. The high concept of Discord collecting dying universes, of being older than the multiverse, of all these different things, I was impressed. The second time I listened to it, I started to notice that I wasn't engaging as much with the concept and with Discord as a character because it was too big.
and this is sort of what I was going back to before. When things are scaled up this big, it starts creating plot holes, and that is sorry, for this point I have to sort of make another one that we kind of skipped over. With this library of all these books that make no sense, of jumbled words, before that, he read every book that had ever existed, every book that had ever been written. And that's how he grew to love stories and love books. He was like, this is amazing, I want to read all the books. So he creates a spell to bring in all the books, he reads all the books, he loves them. That keeps him busy for however many thousands or millions of years.
Because he says he's experienced everything, so he'd rather read about experiencing it as someone else.
Exactly. And then when he runs out of those books, he's like, crap, I'm out of books, I'll make up my own. And then he makes this library of all these books. And he loves that he's created something which might actually be able to last as long as he does. And that's quite a powerful thing as well.
Because the essence of chaos, the chaotic nature of the books themselves with the random compilations of words, the number of books there could possibly be, as we said, if he's reading them in real time. The problem being that he's cast this spell on his brain so that when he reads things, no time at all has passed in reality. And he cast it upon himself when he was stuck in stone, but he's made his life even harder, because it means that he will reach the end of the library faster than this particular universe will end.
Exactly, and we jumped through about 4 points that I had something I really wanted to say about. But the one that I was going to say about before, the massive plot hole with him existing for a multiple amount of universes, and then the other thing I mentioned about reading every book that's ever existed, is he would become so incredibly omnipotent and just powerful and like just so wise that no one would be able to outsmart him with all that knowledge and all that experience. He'd be too overpowered, effectively. He'd have too much experience, I reckon.
I can see the validity in what you're saying. I would say it kind of rests on how much of the books he's read he remembers. Because I don't read nearly as many as Discord. I read through audiobooks and through regular reading. I probably read about between 300 and 500 books a year.
And it's fair to say you are very book smart.
But I don't retain a lot of it. Some of them, they're like candy. I call them candy floss books because they're nice while they last. I don't remember them after they're gone. But it doesn't mean that I haven't read the book, I haven't experienced that book. It does mean that there's no retention factor to it, which means that there may have been facts and interesting information in that book, but I have not retained it. So just the act of reading doesn't necessarily mean that it's advanced my intelligence anymore. It doesn't mean that it has increased my knowledge. It just means that I read a book and then I forgot about it. So it could be the same with Discord. If he's lasted several universes, just reading a book doesn't mean that he's going to understand. It doesn't mean that he's going to understand or retain any of it. It just means he read it.
Okay, that's a fair point. My next point is, I think after reading every book that exists, he would have a much more earthy sort of quality to him, a much more sort of down-to-earth sort of way of being, because...
I don't know.
Explain
thyself, Reverb Brony.
Sorry. Okay, we're talking about every book which is an actual book rather than a complete jumble of words. Shit, that's all I got. There's a lot of really smart literature. Typically, a book is written by, it's a very, very general term, but most books you'd say are written by a fairly competent person in literature, and... I
don't know, Jeffrey Archer writes books.
that's it for the most part.
Stephanie Meyer writes books.
Yeah, okay. This is one of the things I wrote down on my second listen, except it's a fairly small thing. But I feel like he would have a lot of knowledge on what does and doesn't work. And one of the things that Chinchillax has said is that after reading all this bunch of books which are just a complete jumble of words, which is like, potato plus ice equals snowstorm, and he sees that, and this is one of the things that he said when he comes out of the stone, he creates all these crazy sort of things of cows dancing in tutus under a lava lamp. And he says that he does these things because that's something he hasn't experienced before, and it's something he wants to see what will happen. And I love the idea of that. I love the concept of that because he has lived for all these multiple universes. Kind of drove him crazy, and these are things he hasn't yet experienced. So he's like, oh, I want to experience that, which is really quite interesting and quite a cool concept. At one point, I had a problem with him doing that because I thought he should know better after reading every normal book, but I love the idea so much that I'm taking that back now.
And then we get into what happens when he has talked to Twilight about all this, when he's explained all this. And Twilight realises Spike realises that he's read the end of Twilight's book. He knows how this story ends. And it turns out Discord was kind of hoping there would be an end to this almost self-imprisonment that he's created for himself. And he doesn't know how to end his imprisonment. He doesn't know how to enrich his life to the point where it feels worth living anymore, because he is everlasting. And Spike works it out. And there's one character, we kind of mentioned her earlier, one character whom Twilight brings into to Discord's head. Who's that character, Reverb?
It's little Fluttershy.
Yes. And Fluttershy is brought in, and Twilight's very wary of this, because she doesn't understand how bringing Fluttershy in and trapping Fluttershy too, because Twilight can't get out. And she can't magic herself out. She can bring people, she can bring ponies and creatures in, but she can't get anybody out. And Spike insists on her bringing Fluttershy. Twilight doesn't understand how this will help. Discord does send Spike and Twilight home to the real world, but he keeps Fluttershy. And he explains everything to her, and she's the one that he explains to about him being older than all the universes, and about him being born from the chaos of a dying universe and outlasting the multiverse, and he will always be there. And she sort of looked at him, and she said, "You've experienced everything that could ever be experienced." "Yes. And this is why you do the things that you do." "Yes. Have you ever been friends with me before?"
Yeah,
and she asks that simple
line.
little question, and he can't answer, because there has never been a Fluttershy before, and he has never been friends with her before.
Exactly. And she is so adorably naive in all of this, and it's very cute. It's very, very Fluttershy, and it's very, very sweet to see, and that's something I really quite liked. She says, "Have you ever you've experienced everything except you haven't experienced being my friend?" It's like, Fluttershy.
And Chinchillax brings it down from this epic, enormous, immeasurable, high concept fiction, and he immediately reduces it right down to, I'm calling it the human element. It's this personality, this personal element to the story, and he makes it about the characters again. Because that was a bit of an issue I had with the early part of the story, is that Twilight didn't really feel like Twilight. She was doing Twilighty things. She was very clever. She was talented at magic. She was casting spells. She was doing all the stuff that you could imagine Twilight doing, but it all felt a bit hollow. And it wasn't until Fluttershy turned up, and she was exactly the way that she should be, that I started to think, we're back into actual characters being a major factor now.
Speaking of that, another character I felt seemed a little bit out of place and just sort of was there more so for a plot point was Spike. And that's just because Spike was trapped alone in Discord's mind with nothing but this library of gibberish for 2 full years. And he then sees this book, which is, it is glowing. The God book. You want to try to figure out the possibility of him finding that book in that library.
Because Twilight didn't cast that spell to find Spike. She cast that spell to find the book that told her life story, so she would know what to do. Because every book in the library is finished, so if she writes everything but the last 5 pages, it must tell her how to get out of the library.
Exactly, and for Spike to find that book amongst all those books, maybe Discord put him there?
Yeah, I like to think that it was Discord. Kind of, if not steered him there, then put him there.
It would have to have been, because I'm pretty sure you're more likely to be struck by lightning like 350 times in a day. That's the sort of
That's
the number.
That's a really unlucky day.
That's a pretty bad day.
That's a day in Australia. That's definitely a day in Australia. Everything tries to kill you in Australia.
That's just what we say, is to try to keep the people out that we don't want in.
What, you mean everybody? I've rumbled you. All Australians, I know your secret now. There's no such thing as bird-eating spiders, or if they're very new. There's no such thing as poisonous snakes and poisonous spiders and things that swim up the toilets and... Yeah, none of it exists. It's all a big ruse.
It's all a big ruse to keep our best speeches to ourselves.
You admit it. You admit it.
I had a point.
Right.
That's right. No, it's fine. It's just because, like, you know, that, you know, being struck by lightning 350 times in a day. That's the sort of, I mean, when you're talking about this, a number of books which is 400,000 digits long, and with the unit of measurement is a universe, that's the sort of scale we're talking about of how unlikely he is to find this one book without being sent there directly.
I like to think it was Discord who put in there, because Discord does admit that he was hoping that Twilight would be able to figure out a way to end his pain that he hasn't been able to, and he does admit that. Like, it was internal monologue, it wasn't external dialogue, but he admits that, so I like to think that he placed Spike there because Twilight needed to find Spike and then try and figure out a way out and help him that way.
Sorry, my original point was that I think Spike is out of character. No, it's okay, I went on a major tangent. I think Spike is out of character because after 2 years of this torture of being alone in a library, just with nothing but these books of gibberish, he sees this book and he is so completely moved by it that he completely forgives Discord. He wants this to be the reality. He wants this to be what happens, and he isn't upset at all. He's only excited for this to be a thing. And that is something I have a hard time grasping. 2 years of isolation and torture.
And he's not very old. Even after 2 years, by Dragon standards, he's a baby still.
Well, a baby who's taller than Twilight.
But mentally, he's still not at that point of, I forgive you entirely for locking me away from my friends for 2 years, not telling me what the hell was going on, not telling me I didn't need to eat or drink or sleep anymore, and just leaving me here to wander the halls with no fucking explanation whatsoever. And
to forget all that and only want a happy ending for the one
for
who
you.
did this to you.
Yeah.
And that part I felt is a bit, you know, it needs to be that way to not make Discord a major bad guy, because it would be, because you can't have all this happen and Spike be like, yo, you tortured me for 2 years, what's up with that? You can't have a happy ending off with Fluttershy, I'm pissed, and he'd be very well justified to be that way, so it needs to be Spike written off being happy for the sake of a happy ending for everyone.
Which, yeah, Spike does want a happy ending for everyone, but you're right. In the context and the internal logic of this story, it wouldn't quite make sense. I don't know if even Spike's that forgiving. And then we come into, because we are going to have to wrap it up soon, can we get on to what happened when Fluttershy comes out of Discord's head, and you mentioned earlier, she says, we've got to let him out now. Because every second that passes here is hours and days there. You need to let him out now. Yes. The elements of harmony, we need to get him out of stone now. Don't question me. Don't ask why. Just do it. And the others kind of motivate and go, okay, we kind of trust you. All right. And Twilight backs her up, and they do. They let him out. Internally, Discord has started getting rid of the spells so that he can only have one thought at a time. That he works in real time again. And he realizes maybe he has cast too many spells. Maybe making his thoughts faster than light was a bad thing. And he undoes all these spells and he has one thought at a time. And when he's released from stone, he's not the same Discord. He's thinking of one thing at once. And then we get onto the bit, because I like that idea. He was willing to change a bit for Fluttershy in order to stay her friend, so that he could spend the rest of her life with her and be her friend and think about the day-to-day stuff rather than try and think of multiple things at once like he was doing.
Exactly. And to be her friend on her level, thinking on the same wavelength as her and experiencing life at the same speed as her.
Yeah.
Which is really quite awesome.
I like that. And then we get to the bit I didn't like.
There's two things before we get to that. Two other things about... Okay, we can get to that first. We'll talk about my bit afterwards.
Go on.
Okay. Firstly, Discord is saying how being in this library is a torture, or he talks about everything as though it's a torture. He talks about living so long as a torture. Why on earth would he slow that down?
See,
Why would he slow down his torture so he can experience it more slowly?
I think it might have been that he was doing it so he wouldn't have to pay attention to the outside world.
But, I mean,
wasn't
he's
this when
already...
he was in stone that he started this?
Well, actually, that's something else. Because apparently he's 45% of the way through this library of 400,000 digits of a universe as long. He couldn't have done that in 1,000 years. That would have taken him... And he also... Actually, no, that's right. He says he's finally made something that might last as long as he does, which is a multiple amount of universes. But he's 45% of the way through after being turned to stone for 1,000 years.
Because he sped up his thoughts.
Except...
Why would you do that?
Well, there's that. But, I mean, why would... If he says this universe is going to last as long as him, but so far he's nearly halfway through after just 1,000 years...
Maybe it was wishful thinking?
Yeah. I see a math problem there. But,
maths, clever maths person again!
No, it's okay. I mean, a universe lasts much longer than 1,000 years, correct?
Yeah.
He's been
I'm still hung up on
stone.
universes being a measurement of space, not time.
The length of a universe is a measurement of space.
Just carry on.
Sorry. He would have had to start this way, way, way before he was put in stone. Or his mind would have to be slowed down to the point where it would be much slower in there than it is out there. Otherwise, because for the time that Fluttershy is out there for about 30 seconds, about, I think, maybe a month passes in his head, but if he was going to read that many books in just 1,000 years, it would need to be like... Spike wouldn't be trapped in there for 2 years before they found him. He'd be trapped in there for like a couple 100,000 years. It'd be just the scale. That scale of maths is far too skewed.
Right.
Sorry, another maths plot hole. But the other one is why would he need to? He says that he can transform himself out of being stone whenever he wants, except he waits to be polite. Why would... And then he talks about... I don't see why he would feel the need to be polite to these little creatures whose lifespans are like a speck of dust in time compared to his. I mean, he's never really said to have a lot of respect for them. He's kind of just like, whatever, they're the next species in this, pinprick of a time point in my endless life cycle. I don't see why he would bend to their rules of being trapped in stone for 1,000 years. Or for the few days that he's trapped here, because he's written as such an incredibly godly, ever-existing presence that he's written too big to then fit the scope of being controlled by anyone. That's the sort of... When you go that big, that's where it sort of creates those small little plot holes, which, again, I forgive because it's such an amazing story and has so many incredible premises, but those are a couple of things I started picking out on my fourth and fifth reading.
Alright then.
Now we can get to your point that you wanted to make, and I kept interrupting.
Mine sounds much less impressive now, and that was just...
No, yours is really real on an actual proper character level. Mine's just picking apart maths.
Well, it says something that the very last chapter of this is called Mathematical Notes, and Chinchillax, that we should put this out, this is a multi-chapter story. It's read as one story in the reading, but it is actually, it's got 11 chapters and a prologue and a Mathematical Notes epilogue. They're all very, very short chapters, though. I think some of them are less than 1,000 words, some of them are just 500 words long, which I would have issue with just because if you were waiting for that to come out one at a time, but he apparently released it all on the same day. Which does beg the question, why not just put it as one story? But that's by the by, that's authorial prerogative. The thing that I had an issue with was in chapter 11, after Discord has been released, after he has slowed down his thinking, after he has decided to live life on Fluttershy's level, he says to her, please don't call me Discord anymore, my name is actually Accord, and he changes himself into a beautiful stallion. And at that point, he ceases to be anything even remotely approaching the canon character. And I think the story would have been better served without that chapter. Because at that point, for me, Discord became a Gary Stu. And for those not aware of it, the concept of Mary Sue is an absolutely perfect character, a female character who falls in love or befriends or has some deep personal connection with a member of canon cast and has a tragic backstory, and therefore everybody loves and can do no wrong. And the Gary Stu is the male version of that. And if you look at the stuff that we've discussed so far, even if you haven't read the story yourself, although why haven't you read the story if you listen to a review of it? Although actually I've been called on that before. I said that once before in a heroic review, and somebody responded with, well, I watched the reviews to find out if the fic's worth reading, so...
Bring it to your math class.
Yeah.
Talk about it there.
Yeah, actually that'd be a good thing. Ponies in education. But... I lost my thread now. Yeah.
Sorry.
That story... That particular chapter of the story, it broke the connection for me. That up until that point, he was still Discord. He may have been called Accord in his own head, and he'd be called Discord outside of it because he was the Lord of Chaos, and because, like you said, he wanted to see these chaotic things brought to life outside in the exterior world. But in that chapter, when he no longer looked like Discord, he no longer had Discord's name, he no longer thought like Discord, he no longer did what Discord did, he no longer had any resemblance to the character from the show, that was a step too far for me. When he became this beautiful stallion and Fluttershy, her heart fluttered. It was the Gary Stu chapter, and I objected to that one being in there because I felt the story would have been stronger without that one, because then it became wish fulfillment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I know exactly what you're saying, and I thought the same thing. I don't think it irked me quite as much as you, because I mean,
I didn't understand the maths, so what else was I going to get pissed about?
You were still working on the maths by that point.
Oh no, I'd left the maths behind going, do not understand, I will put this in a box, and I will store this box in my head, and I will lock the box, and I will snap the key off in the lock, and I will leave it.
And I was doing my working out on the other page, and it's like, oh, he turned into a pony, that's nice. Minus the 3, carry the 400 million.
And I'm sitting there going, what? He's a pony? What? No! Oh, damn it. You were doing so well! Because, I won't dress up, I like this story. There's a reason why we both of us kept sort of plugging away at reviewing this thing. Even after a year of problems getting towards it, there was a reason why we wanted to do this podcast. Because it is a good story. It's a high concept story, it's a well written story, it's not a perfect story.
And I mean, I haven't listened to this story I haven't listened or read to the actual story in about, God, at least 4 or 5 months.
It was March when we last tried to do it.
Was that the last time? I might have read it then, or I might have just gone over my notes again, because we did it. We planned it so many times that it was like, okay, I think I remember it.
I haven't
heard it for.
When we went away together in April, I said to you when we were there, we're sitting at the kitchen table going, do you want to record that thing while we're both in the same room? We still didn't do it then.
But yeah, I mean, the fact that, when's the last time you listened to the story?
March.
Yeah, and the fact that we remember all this.
We sort of remember all this, because I did get the basic premise and the maths wrong about time at the very beginning.
But, yeah, we remember this story pretty well, and we experience, as you said before, you said you read about 300 books a year, except a lot of them
candy floss books.
As, like, candy floss.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite a pretty way to say it. But the fact that we've retained this story for that long, we've gone through so many different kinds of fan fiction stories and stuff since then. Mm-hmm. You've introduced me to a lot of amazing DC and Marvel stuff. But the fact we've retained this story and remember it so thoroughly speaks for itself. It is an incredible story.
It is. And that sounds like a pretty good place to leave it. We haven't really touched upon the audio reading, but Chinchillax has a very relaxing voice, and you should go and listen to the audio version if that is your bag. Although, why are you on my channel if you don't like audio readings and fanfictions? Also,
I love the picture that he got done of the library that he's got on his Fimfiction account. Because, I've got it up on the screen now, and it's a very clever way that he drew that. Because,
he did it himself, didn't he?
It looks completely endless, and it's a clever thing to put there, because, as you were saying, a lot of people would have a hard time imagining something like that, and it's very well drawn.
Right, okay then. So we'll leave it there.
How long have we been going for?
Long enough. I don't know, the Skype recorder doesn't actually show me a time. But we started recording at about 26 minutes into this Skype call, and it's now 1 hour and 31 minutes.
Did I break the record?
You may well have broken Goombuster's record.
Ha!
As the longest podcast. We'll see when I edit this. So if you're listening to this and if you listen to this and it's longer than the 48 minutes podcast I did with Goombuster about Flash Sentry, then there is a new record. And I'm also going to hate you, Reverb, for making me edit something this long.
I thought we did pretty good staying really quite on track.
You mean apart from
with
going
everything.
talking about Planck lengths and otters?
That is on
and
track.
otters.
That is on track. It's a story about maths, and that was a really good example of maths. And people can, I'll find the link of that, and you can.
It'll go in the description. So yeah, Reverb will provide the link. He'll go and mug Xenomorph for it, and yeah. And therefore we end our discussion on the Library of Discord, maths, the universe, otters, and everything. I say thank you very much to Reverb Brony for, after a year of waiting, finally reviewing this story with me.
Yay, we shall do more of these.
Yes, we shall
Somehow,
indeed.
at some point.
Less math-based ones, though. Fewer. Shit, no, I've got the word wrong. Fewer math-based ones, not less. Fewer math-based ones. I'm going to stop now. Thank you very much for listening, everybody, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Fucking maths. I fucking hate fucking maths. Can't fucking stand fucking maths. Too many numbers.